Alrighty, good morning. Last Aussie one. We're in the next 3 weeks, next 2 weeks. When am I back? We'll get into that in a moment. It's actually winter now, hence the jumper. Now, we're about to go back to Norway. This afternoon, we're going back to Norway. This evening, back to Norway. And where's my phone? I'm looking at the temperatures. Where are we? Oslo. We're not just going to Norway, we are having a bit of a holiday after that, details of which I might share a little bit later on. Oslo highs today, 16, and then 16, 13, 15, 17, 16, 16. It's consistent. This is summer, like Oslo summer. Where are we? Surfers Paradise, real name too. Today, 20, 21, 22, 22, 22, 23, 22. We are consistent. Also consistent. But it's just like it's sun like every day here. Not as much in Oslo. It's raining. Ah, crap. Anyway, can't plan these things, can you? Not the weather anyway. So this is the wild joy of where we live. Like our winters are so much nicer than Oslo's summers. It's different, mind you. It's different. There's something very, very nice about being in Europe, even in London, John, when it's summer and the sun is out and you're sitting. And I think what it is for those of you from that part of the world who have been there before, in the summer, you don't get a lot of sun outside of that period of time. So when the sun comes out, like everyone is outside. And I remember, walking around Oslo during summer and going, why are there people in the park wearing bikinis? Like, don't get me wrong, don't have an issue with it. However, that would be really unusual. Like, why wouldn't you go to the beach like a normal person and get in your bikini? Depending on who you are, get in your bikini then. G'day, James. Mike is here. First one's caught live for a while. John, not being able to catch you live in a while. Wow, okay, there's a lot of that. You know what it is? I think it's the earliness. So it's 6 a.m. here. I've been up for 2 hours already because it has been a mega week, which we will get into. That'll be the last bit here. That's a very, I was going to say very Norwegian name, very Swedish. He's in Sweden. Good evening from Sweden. It's rain and about 15 to 7 Celsius. Yeah. My parents are in Sweden at the moment. I've FaceTime with them yesterday and they're like, hey, look at this. So, looks pretty rainy. So, anyway, it'll be nice. It'll be good. So, actually, let me do the sponsor thing first because there is a new, not new sponsor, which will make sense in a moment. So I've had Collide as a sponsor for many years, and I have had a really close relationship to 1Password for many, many years. When I start using 1Password, I have a feeling it was about 13 years ago. And of course, then they've later sponsored Have I Been Pwned, and they've got integrations with pwned passwords and all sorts of things in their 1Password Watchtower product. And then I joined their board of advisors, and now they have acquired Collide, which I've mentioned on previous sponsorship slots for Collide. So today is the first sponsorship slot of the Collide, which is now rolled into the 1Password. So see how it's like old but new but not. Anyway, let's get into it. 1Password, extended access management, which is what Collide has brought to the party. Secure every sign-in for every app on every device. And as I've sort of speculated a little bit when I've mentioned the Collide sponsorships from previous times, I was very curious to see how this integrates. Because when you think about password managers, and then we're moving into a passwordless future, and of course 1Password does do synchronization of things like passkeys, awesome feature, which I do use a lot. But seeing the value proposition here where it extends that secure sign-in to the devices themselves so that per the website here, modern security and IT teams need to make sure every identity device and application is secure. Only 1Password extended access management checks every box. You need more than what today's access management tools offer, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's the melding of the two brands that I've had that association with. I am going to learn more about that as time goes by. I have a webinar coming up I'm going to be doing with 1Password after I get back from travel. And I suspect that at some point in time that will pivot through to some of the extended access management stuff too, courtesy of the Collide acquisition. So big thanks to those guys for sponsoring my blog again, but new. You know what I mean? All right. Mike says, first decent period of good weather this summer at the moment here in Cambridge. Been there. I've been a lot of places now. There's a few others I'm going to tick off the list later this year. I have never been outside the airport at Dubai. I've been through Dubai airport. I think I looked at my trip at the other day. It was like 36 times or something. I've never been outside the airport. We're going to do that at the end of the year trip. And the other thing we're going to do, which I have never done before, is go to Oman. And the rationale was we want to go back to Norway because Charlotte for Christmas, which is good. We want to go via Dubai and do that. And I want to do one other thing along the way. And I wanted to go somewhere I'd never been before. And I was kind of keen to go to Turkey. The rest of the family, not as much. So I got outvoted there. Anyway, so we found Oman, which is literally driving distance from Dubai. And it's got one of those names where you're like, isn't that in a part of the world like near Yemen or something? So yes, it shares a border with Yemen. Yemen, you don't want to go to at all. Oman, apparently one of the top 10 safest places in the world. And it's got all of these amazing reviews from people who've been there. It's like everyone who goes there sort of says, I had never thought about this before. Why don't more people know about this? It was amazing. And then I caught up with a friend of mine last week, and she's like, this is my most favorite place in the world, Oman. So anyway, we're going to go to Oman. That's going to be in November, in a November trip. Something else I can tick off the list. Don is in Virginia. G'day, Don. I'm feeling this is a better time of day to do this stuff. Alrighty, let's talk about the stuff that is coming up. So, main thing, heading back to Europe today for NDC Oslo. This is going to be an awesome NDC Oslo. They're all awesome, but significance for me, a few things here. It is 10 years ago since I went to my first NDC Oslo. And without giving away too much of what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to do the opening keynote this year. Second time I've done the opening keynote, which is great. One of the things I want to talk about is, for me to go to the other side of the world 10 years ago to NDC Oslo was, it was like, this is like the unachievable dream. And I'd kept hearing about this event, this conference, for years, particularly via .NET Rocks, listening to Carl and Richard, and having them talk about NDC Oslo and this amazing entire stadium that gets turned into a conference, and all of the different things that they do there. And I'd listen to this on the podcast over and over and over again. And eventually, in early 2014, at the very beginning of my speaking career, I applied and I got accepted. And I got to go to NDC Oslo. And I did this talk, How I Hacked Myself to Norway, that absolutely killed it. It was an awesome talk. Everyone loved it. And I've been going back as much as I can since. Obviously not every year, because there was a period of weirdness there a few years ago. But NDC Oslo became a massive part of my life. And of course, later on, I married the person who was the project manager for NDC Oslo. So that was... that's a very personal connection. So this year I get to go back, 10-year anniversary, do the opening keynote. My parents are going to be there. First time my parents have ever seen me do a talk live. That's going to be good. I mean, it'll be good. But yeah, wow, it's this long. And then just to continue the whole family thing, as I've mentioned before on the show many times, I'm going to be doing a 3D printing talk with my 11-year-old daughter, Elle. And it is going to be, honestly, like, I'm excited about the keynote, and it's great. And they have a stage in the middle of the stadium. So you're there as a speaker in the middle of the stadium, and 360 degrees around you are thousands and thousands of people with big screens. It's a massive thing. And there's a lot of energy and positivity and enthusiasm, which as a speaker is really, really cool. I'm also exceptionally excited about that 3D printing talk because she's so excited about it. And we have put in so much work and we've done so much practice. Both of us sitting here together in my office, going through the whole thing over and over and over again. I have an entire suitcase of 3D printed things. We've literally taken a dedicated suitcase It's an old one. I think we can leave it in Oslo afterwards. But it's full of 3D printed stuff that's going to be part of the talk and part of things that we hand around, and some other things I won't give away just in case anyone listening to this is going to be there as part of the audience. But I'm very, very excited about doing that talk with Al. And we all want to see our kids achieve and do things that push them and excite them. And I'm very, very proud of my daughter for what she's done. Anyway, this will be something that will be recorded and will be online later on. And I'll definitely be sharing that. Nick 007 is in London. Mike says, hoping to make NDC security in January. Heard so many good things from you and others. I was literally just speaking to Scott Helm about half an hour ago. And my understanding is that he will be there. I don't think I'll be at NDC security in January because I'll be in Europe up until late December, unless I stay on. That's becoming a very long trip because it's already a month, and it's summer here as well, which is not like Norwegian summer, as we've just discussed. Snowflake. Now, that has had a lot of news this week, hasn't it? So, scrolling back, and I'm really interested, if anyone's listening to this now and has more information about this, something I've missed, because there's a lot of news going on at the moment, I'd be really curious to hear this. So, we had news, was it a week ago? Must have been a week ago. Why don't I just go to my tweets, because they're all in there. We had news about a Ticketmaster data breach. And the thing about the Ticketmaster data breach is a really big headline, 560 million records, somebody wanting $500,000 in order to send the data to the happy buyer. Now, I'd originally tweeted this. Let's have a look. May 29. So this would have been a week ago. We would have spoken about this. So big incident, 1.3 terabytes of data, 560 million customers, full names, email addresses, all the rest of it. It does seem like this is confirmed because the parent entity, Live Nation, has submitted one of their, 50 something submissions in the US saying, yes, we've had a data breach. Haven't actually seen a disclosure. And again, if I have missed something here, jump in and tell me I'm wrong. Niall's here. G'day, mate. Niall, are you coming to NDC Oslo? I keep meaning to send you a message and ask, but I'd forgotten. So let me know in the comments. So they have submitted that information to the SEC in the US. We have not yet seen disclosures to individuals. We'll be there. Awesome. Let's get some beer. Oh, and we're going to WDS as well, just in case. Friday. Let me know. Where were we? So yes, Whiskey Bar. Come on, I'm trying to focus here. We haven't seen disclosures sent to individuals yet from Ticketmaster. Now, one of the things, and I avoid having this discussion online because it just gets out of control. One of the things I found interesting just jumping around is a day or two ago, someone on Twitter popped up angrily, I know on Twitter, right? Angrily, and said, Ticketmaster is in trouble because they haven't let everyone know as they are required to do under GDPR. And I think one of the things that people tend to miss, and I've had this pointed out a few times, is that the obligations around reporting are primarily around reporting to the regulator. So you have to notify the regulator in whatever jurisdiction you're in within the EU within the specified time frame. The requirement to notify the individuals is not necessarily the same thing. And we saw this come up with Deezer, the French streaming music service. I think there's about 230 million people in there who notified their regulator, CNIL from memory in France, and then they didn't let the individuals know. Have I been pwned? Let the individuals know. People got angry and said you had to, when in fact they didn't have to. But it's still a bad look. Anyway, it's tangential. I think, obviously, everyone should be disclosing as early as possible to impacted individuals. But can you imagine how many lawyers are in that room? Like the room where the Live Nation / Ticketmaster folks are hanging around talking about this data breach. They're already facing something like 30 lawsuits for monopolistic tendencies in the US. And now they've got this as well. So there is nothing coming out of Live Nation and Ticketmaster that hasn't gone through 30 different hands of lawyers, that's for sure. So we saw that news come out, and as I'm scrolling through my thread, just because it helps me peg the time frame. So it was a week ago. I got a huge amount of media interest last week. And I think I mentioned it on the Friday, but I'd had a lot of interviews and so on here in this office, online on the Zooms, lots of radio too. An incommensurate amount for a breach where the data hadn't yet spread around. There'd been no notification sent. All we had was a post on a popular hacking forum, clear web, not dark web. And then we only learned, and in fact, I think when I did this video on Friday last week, I was like, we haven't heard anything yet, but it's a Friday. And that is the time that you do bury bad news. I bet you they disclose on the Friday, which is when that filing went in, sometime after I'd recorded this. It's like I've seen it all before, isn't it? So there was that. Now, after I did that video last week, one of the things that started coming out was the situation with Snowflake. Now, Snowflake provides a cloud storage database option, service, everything is a service. And Hudson Rock, Cybercrime Intelligence, looking at the thread, had written up a story. I've still got the hero image here in my thread. Hacker confirms access through InfoStealer infection. Now, you can't read the Hudson Rock story anymore because they've deleted it. And it would appear that the story they wrote up claimed a compromise at Snowflake. Now, if we keep going through the chronology here, we've then had Santander disclosing a data breach. And Santander did actually name Snowflake. So we hadn't seen Ticketmaster or Live Nation name Snowflake. It was the usual sort of third-party vendor, yada, yada, yada. Santander is like, screw this. It's like it's Snowflake. Now, interesting, just tangentially, I've found, I think I mentioned this last week too, but so many times when there's been a data breach which has occurred at a third party where the first party has a dependency on them, I'm seeing these disclosures which are like, so there was an incident at a third party and then they don't name them. And you're like, well, you know, who was it? Where was the data? I know that in the terms and conditions I didn't read, I agreed to you sending the data off to them, but it'd still be nice to know. So anyway, kudos to Santander, I guess, for actually naming them. So the Hudson Rock thing came out. It then got deleted. Now, the sentiment here is that they got it very wrong. And my understanding is that they got a letter from a lawyer, which is never much fun. And they acquiesced and they removed the content. Now, inevitably, there was a basis for them removing it. And what seems to be unfolding now, and Snowflake's position as well, and it sounds like they've had a couple of the big incident response companies in there to help them support this position, but their position seems to be their customers haven't properly looked after their keys. Now, if you think about it that way, I mean, let's say it's Have I Been Pwned. You know, Have I Been Pwned, we issue API keys. If someone else gets hold of that API key and starts querying their domains, for example, well, is that our fault or is that their fault? Probably their fault, although I'd argue there's a bit of a difference between being able to query someone's domain and see which email addresses are in mostly public data breaches anyway, and suck down 560 million records of your customers. There is a spectrum. I would argue that being a cloud storage provider does have a higher burden of responsibility. So this seems to be the situation where Snowflake is well and truly casting the blame in other directions, and perhaps justifiably so. But I was listening to the Risky Biz podcast yesterday. Do make sure you listen to that if you listen to nothing else. And Pat made a very good point, which is regardless of where the fault lies, even if it is customers, it's not a good look for Snowflake because they are there in the headlines as having suffered a data breach. Now, maybe that is partly the Hudson Rock story as well. And I wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of possible damages claims against Hudson Rock for writing that piece. But even without that, that's still the headline. Like, it's not good for business to have your customers' cloud storage accounts taken over, even if it is their fault. We've seen some advisories come from our Australian Signals Directorate, which is effectively our NCSC, was the ACSC. They're rebranding here to the ASD. Also about Snowflake, being told to look after that. Australian organisations who utilise Snowflake should reset credentials for active accounts. which is interesting because if the issue is the customers themselves disclosing it, now we don't know if they put it in public GitHub repos or other places. We've seen discussion about info stealers, but I think the info stealer angle was mostly Hudson Rock's position, which of course they've since deleted that post. ASD goes on, disable non-active accounts, enable MFA, and review user security. The problem is, of course, if you've got API keys which are persistent because they're used by your app, and they were issued after the MFA challenge, and you've had the keys issued, well, MFA doesn't necessarily help you a lot if those keys have then been disclosed without there being other access controls. Snowflake Exposure Advisory to assist in identifying instances of unauthorized access. Now that was June 1. That was 6 days ago by my clock. Snowflake denies cyber thieves broke through its security. Now, part of the confusion here as well is it seems that there is someone within Snowflake who had an account compromised, but it looks like, what did the Hudson, I'm just going to search for info stealer on this story. So much info going around here. Info stealer, space. I was trying to figure this out the other day. Is there a space between info and stealer or no space? Anyway, it's tangential. So where do we end up with here? Update to add June 3. Hudson Rock has pulled its report offline following legal pressure from Snowflake. Oh, that's a link. What's in there? Another Register story. Hudson Rock yanks report fingering Snowflake employee. It's not a great word for a headline, is it? Fingering Snowflake employee cred snafu for mega leak. By directly communicating with the threat actor behind the massive data breach of cloud storage giant Snowflake, we gained unprecedented insight into the devastating impact of InfoStealer infections. And then they've backed that back a bit. Anyway, there is a bigger question, of course, about how many other companies are impacted by this. So Ticketmaster, Santander. I think I did tweet the other day and say that there was one other one. Is that in the thread there? It's somewhere within my other threads. But who knows? The sense you get is between Live Nation / Ticketmaster and then Snowflake, the crafting of the messaging has been so cautious and inevitably for legal reasons that it's very hard to figure out precisely what's going on here. Dale says, mentioning T's and C's reminded me of a booking I made recently. The page asking to accept included a 5-minute timer before losing my slot and having to start the booking again. Interesting UX choice. Yeah, some of that stuff where there's really high demand for bookings has some pretty weird behaviors there. All right, so that's where we're at with that one. I feel like that's got a way to play out yet. I have had a bunch of emails from people saying, when are you going to load the Ticketmaster data? There's an easy answer to that: when I get it. At the moment, I do not have it. I don't know if someone's paid their $500,000 for it. It might be like a Dropbox LinkedIn sort of scenario where the data gets leaked, though 2012, and then 4 years later, it actually appears broadly. Shouldn't have said leaked. When it gets hacked, compromised, and it takes 4 years before it actually filters out on the public domain. So who knows? Okay, now onto the big one this week, the Telegram InfoStealer combo list scraped data. This has not been a great week for my sleep, if I'm honest, which has not been great leading into going away and needing to finish these 2 talks and focus on them and not be distracted, because we have been absolutely smashed by a combination of blog comments, tickets due to subscribers on Have I Been Pwned, emails which I've largely just filed away. Let me just go back to the beginning and explain what happened and go from there. So someone reached out to me about a week ago and said, I've got a whole bunch of data that is from various Telegram channels, and it's combo lists and info stealers. So just to quantify both those terms in case they're unfamiliar, combo lists are usually username and password pairs. The username is sometimes just a plain text user-chosen username. Very frequently, it is an email address. Email address, plain text. They are made up usually from multiple different data breaches. So imagine someone gets themselves a whole going to say shitload of data breaches. I'll say shitload of data breaches. And they go through, and a bunch of them have got plain text passwords, easy job. Some of them have got hashed passwords, so they crack them, and they just amalgamate them all together. This is nothing new. We've seen it over and over and over again. It was just over 5 years ago I loaded that collection one set of credential stuffing lists, which numbered 700 something million unique email addresses, including mine. Nothing new about that per se. Info stealers come from infected machines. So someone's got malware on their machine, and the info stealer collects credentials as they are entered into the browser. There's an important difference between these two. The combo lists, which again I've been in, come from a data breach of a service. It's taking the passwords out of there. It is one service, one place where, say in my case, the password was used. The other places the password is different because I've got a password manager. The info stealers are fundamentally different because the info stealers are capturing data on entry. So even if you have a password manager and everything is strong and unique, if you've downloaded dodgy software and you've got something being able to grab data on input to fields, then your strong randomly generated password gets snafu'd by the info stealer, along with the email address used, along with the website URL, all the way down to whatever path you're on, /login, and it gets added to one of these logs. So this person pops up, says, look, I got all of this stuff. It was someone with a Twitter account with a reasonable number of followers in the InfoSec industry, but still obviously wanting to be somewhat anonymous. And they didn't want to be named in this, which I think, frankly, is a good idea because they would have got smashed like I did. Popped up and said, look, I got all this stuff. And to be honest, my initial reaction was, I get these all the time. It's going to be the same old regurgitated stuff that we've seen over and over again. And then I started looking at it a little bit closer, and that the person sending it to me, sometimes you know when someone's a bit dodgy, and they weren't. What do I know a bit dodgy is, someone is obviously either well and truly on the shady side of things, or they're a kid exchanging some stuff with their mates. Not the case here. So they sent me this data. I started going through it, and it's like, okay, it's what's represented. Like, let's get some empirical numbers. Let's find out how many unique email addresses are in there. 361 million. Okay, that is a very, very large number, but there's over 5 billion unique email addresses and have been pwned. So how many of these have been seen before versus new? And that's when I found that almost half of them, I think I said 42%, were not already in have been pwned. Now that is a fascinating number, to have a set of email addresses from an amalgamated corpus of data, amalgamated being it's from different places and all joined up together, to have that with such unique hit rate. I was expecting to see like 3%. And very often when I've looked at combo lists and things like this before, that's what it's been. It's been like, okay, 97% of this stuff we've seen before. But no, 58% we've seen before. Now what I was sent was 1,700 files that had been scraped out of 500 something Telegram channels. Now, if you've not used Telegram before, how would you best describe Telegram? It's a communication platform. It's very easy to create a channel that people can join, share information, post files to it. It's very easy to be anonymous. It's probably very easy to screw it up too. I imagine many people have come undone by doing that. But certainly the intention of it is to have a high degree of anonymity and privacy, which of course in many cases is wonderful. Sometimes like this, that's great for doing nasty things. So there's all these combo lists posted to all these different channels, and the person that sent us to me just gone and scraped them all out and bundled them all up and sent them to me. So I'm looking at this going, that's a very, very substantial set of previously unseen email addresses. Now we need to figure out how legitimate this is. So I went through, and what I normally do is I'll get a new data breach I'm trying to verify, and I'll go and find the 30 most recent, I find 30 is a sweet spot, 30 most recent have been pwned subscribers that are in that data, and I'll send them all an email, and I'll get half a dozen of them that reply. And the email says something like, look, thank you for signing up for Have I Been Pwned. I'll do the most recent ones because they can remember Have I Been Pwned. I can't remember stuff I signed up to even last week, let alone last year. You recently signed up, your data's in a breach. Can you help me verify it? Would you mind if I send you a snippet of your data? And of course, the people who do reply and don't think it's a scam or a phishing attempt or something are always like, yeah, send it over. And I sent it over, and I have, of course, documented all this. And a bunch of people started saying, yep, this is my data. This is the right email address, right password. Some of this they'd seen in other places before, particularly the combo list stuff. So it's okay, well, that checks out. But each of the people that I'd emailed were also in many other data breaches. So is it just repurposed stuff that's already out there? So then I went and did the query again, and I said, and this is something that is now much, much easier to do since Steph and I started rolling data over to SQL Server and not just table storage. We can start to do ad hoc queries such as, give me the 30 most recent Have I Been Pwned subscribers that have not previously been in a data breach, but are in this corpus. Because that's more interesting. That's not repackaging something that I've seen before. That is a brand new data breach. And that was the responses that were the most fascinating, because most of those people had been in the InfoStealer logs, remembering there's two sort of sets of data and they're all mixed in together. It's not an easy thing to just go, look, this is the InfoStealer stuff, this is the cred stuffing list. And I've got obviously redacted, but a whole bunch of examples in here. I mean, there's one lady here who was obviously in Germany, because there are a whole lot of .de email or rather websites here. And I'm just looking through this list, and it's like www.sixt, the car rental place, .de, and then after that, email address, password. We've got Netflix in there. We've got live.com in there. We've got Amazon in there, telecomdiensta.de, Disney Plus. I mean, all the sorts of stuff that normal people use. And obviously, as she's gone and authenticated into each of these websites, the InfoStealer has grabbed that URL, email address, password, dumped it into a log. And at some time, for reasons that I don't know, those logs have then ended up on public Telegram channels, been scraped out and sent to me. Point is, legitimate data, a large corpus of very new data. One other thing I should mention as I spin through this, I wanted to try and figure out if this InfoStealer stuff was accurate before I even reached out to Have I Been Pwned subscribers. And one of the easiest ways to do that is the first entry on one of the files I put here in the screen cap was for Nike, accounts.nike.com. And of course, after that, there's an email address and a password. So I went over to Nike, I find an enumeration vector. Does this email address exist? Yes. And then I went to another one, Foot Locker. Does it exist? Yes. I went to another one, a Italian tire manufacturer. Does this email address exist? Yes. So see how, from a verification perspective, it just reinforces this over and over and over again. Now, just looking at the comments before I continue on to the bits that have caused me a bit more pain. Kevin says, morning, very good. Telegram is the storage for my wife to store all the photos she cannot keep on her phone due to lack of space. Nice. Now, the challenge with all of these incidents is, what are the criteria for putting it into Have I Been Pwned? And largely the criteria is it's got to be sufficiently new or sufficiently impactful or something that can be done about it. Now, this sort of met, let's say, 1.5 of the criteria. It was definitely sufficiently new. Most of the data breaches I load, if you go and have a look at the Have I Been Pwned Twitter account, you'll see there's every tweet, every time I announce a data breach, I put the percentage, like what percentage of accounts had been seen before. And usually it's in that, let's say, 60-70% range had been seen before. So to have 58% seen before means that there is a very large corpus of new data. Like I said before, I expected this to be like 97%. So a lot of new data. Now, obviously also very impactful because many people had their data taken by InfoStealers. So one of the examples I put in here, it turned out to be a kid. So when I reached out to Have I Been Pwned subscribers, this person replies and they say, thank you for your kindness. Most of these, so I'd sent him a list of the InfoStealer logs, which turned out to be mostly game sites. Most of these I've been able to change the password of, and they do look familiar. The passwords on there have been changed. Is there a way we both can fix this problem as seeing I'm only 14? And that hit a spot, given I have a 14-year-old son, and given I've seen the random crap that his friends install on their machines. And I'm just picturing with this kid, it's like, you're 14, you've got a whole bunch of different gaming websites in your info stealer logs. You're installing cheats, almost certainly installing cheats and other dodgy things, one of which at least has had the malware in it. And he goes on and he says, I've been stressed and scared about these scams because he's getting extortion messages. Now, it's not personal, it's not targeted. We all get extortion messages because our email addresses are out there in different things. I've been stressed and scared about these scams, even though I shouldn't be. I've been stressed and scared today because of another one of these emails. And then he goes on and he shares one of those classic, we've caught you watching porn and masturbating scams. Please give us money or we'll send the video to all your friends. And of course, we know they're all scams. But imagine as a 14-year-old as well, that would have to, So seeing a kid say he's stressed and scared, like that's shit. Anyway, so put the data in have I been pwned, knowing, because I've done this so many times before, knowing what would happen next, which is inevitably people say, please send me the data for my record. And I feel roughly like all 361 million people contacted me this week. That's what I feel like. And you can get a sense of it if you read the comments on the blog post. And I understand the sentiment. Let's acknowledge that first. So people are saying, you have got some information about me, a password, a website, and I want to know what it is because it's impactful for them. And they're curious as well. They're like, shit, what was it? I've got a lot of websites, a lot of passwords. Does that maybe explain the spam? Like maybe it was from this website or that website. Just incidental, tangential note here. This is where the value proposition is, particularly for people with catch-all domains. People with catch-all domains and then unique email addresses per service, and then that domain gets a notification from have I been pwned, and they know, for argument's sake, oh, it was Footlocker. That's great. That's really, really useful. For people with sub-addressing, also really useful. It's just not something that we're yet supporting in terms of being able to do a query for sort of the root alias, and then you get all the sub-addresses back. Although, of course, you could just go through and check every email address you've created if it's in a password manager that can integrate with have I been pwned, such as 1Password. That was not meant to be pitched, by the way, but I think there's other password managers doing similar things. Go and get one of them as well. So, point being, I understand the sentiment of people wanting access to that data. On the other hand, loading that data into have I been pwned and making it searchable is not something I'm going to do. And there are lots of really, really good reasons for that. Let's go through them. Again, feels like the 361 millionth time I've done that this week. Let me just pop up in my text editor here some of these lists, like just to sort of be able to explain with this in front of me what the problem is. Now, where did I put this? I don't think I filed it away just yet because it just seems to be one of those things I have to keep going back to at the moment. There's combos in there. So, 1,748 files. Now, picking a random one here. So this file is email address, password. Okay. I think it's like that the whole way down. It's 190,000 rows. Not sure what happens if you've got a colon in your password. It probably breaks that delimiter somehow. Let's just scroll down the list here. We'll pick another one. This one is some text at the front. Welcome. This is by Boots Any Network. Not copy and not sell this or post from your pub. Thanks. All right, whatever. And it is email address, password, 1,023 lines. Okay, different intro, similar structure. Let's try this one over here. Right, so this one, geez, this one's a big one, 1.8 gig. This one is URL without a scheme, and in fact, all these URLs start with live-ro.net. Username, by the look of it, plain text, not email, well, plain text, not an email address, just a user-chosen one, password. So, totally different format to all the others. You know, there's a lot of, this is obviously steal a log, a lot of Facebook stuff in there as well. Let's pick another random one. This one's 5 kilobytes. What's in there? There's a JSON file. Okay. That's completely different. And we obviously have to parse that differently. Another random one. Oh, this one's a CSV. How about that? So this one has an ID, and then a name, and then a name, then an email address, and then it looks like a float. And so you get my point. There's all these different formats of data. So the first thing is there is no easy way to parse anything other than an email address out. And the reason an email address is easy to parse out is we can regex it, because email addresses very consistently are extractable by a regex. And I say very consistently because there are edge cases. The edge cases are generally email addresses I don't think people are genuinely using. Like if you've got an apostrophe in your email address alias, even with a backslash before it, I really don't think that's a legitimate email address, because so many websites are going to boot you out for that. Yeah, point is, we can easily pull out email addresses. Passwords have no enforceable pattern. Usernames have no enforceable pattern. The URLs that we're seeing here, sometimes they have a scheme, sometimes they don't have a scheme. Sometimes we're in the first position, sometimes we're in the second position, sometimes the delimiters are different. It's very hard to extract this data. We run this service on an absolute shoestring. It's Charlotte and I and a slice of Stefan until he goes full-time in a couple of months from now. We do not have the resources to just be able to go through manually 1,745 files, figure out where the delimiters are, and then pull out the data. Just getting it out in the first place is extraordinarily laborious. And this is happening at a time where I'm rushing to go and finish talks before flying to the other side of the world. That's the first problem. Second problem is we do not have a way of adding additional data attributes to have a been pwned. I tried to do this once as an experiment. Now, obviously, technically, this is possible. It's not rocket science. I did this for the Geeked In breach. So Geeked In was a scraping of LinkedIn and GitHub, and an amalgamation of that data such that you had technology professionals with job history stuff from LinkedIn. And that was posted somewhere. And as an experiment, this was many years ago now, as an experiment, I put that in a have I been pwned, and you had to go through email verification to make sure that it was your address you're searching for, then you could put in extra data. So much more overhead, so much more, and of very limited value. And then the next problem is, let's say it's passwords. I've done well over 100 workshops where we talk about the right way to store passwords and how to protect passwords and how you never, ever, ever store them in plain text. And now I get all these people going, could you please store my password in plain text and put it up on your website so I can go and retrieve? No, no, I'm not going to do that. The risks to you as an individual by having plain text passwords there, which could be pwned out of have I been pwned, we're not beyond pwnage. And then the risk to me as the guy whose head is on the chopping block if something goes wrong is absolutely unacceptable. Like there's just no way in the world I'm going to do that. There will not be a have I been pwned. Very likely will not be a have I been pwned if I do that and something goes wrong. So that's part of the problem. Part of the problem too is this more generic issue of people saying, I would like to have the data from my record retrievable. But make sure you verify me. So make sure, for example, you send an email to my address and then I'll prove I control the address and then I can go and get the data. Now this sounds fine on the surface until you actually stop and think about it. So the vast majority of people, 90% plus empirically based on data I've seen, reuse the same password everywhere. They have just been in a data breach. where a password has been captured, the same password they use everywhere. And you're saying we should send an email to an account where they use the same password as the data breach they've just been in, and then we're going to assume that just because they can access that email, they should get access to. That makes no sense. We've literally just established that you've been in all of these data breaches and you've reused passwords, and now we're going to use your email address as a form of identity verification. Makes no sense whatsoever. And then we get into the different classes of data. And I appreciate that in this particular instance, we're talking about email addresses, passwords, and the websites they were on. But the broader issue that continually comes up about loading everything means that everything encompasses a whole bunch of fields that are classified legally as sensitive. Sexuality, religion, political allegiances, government identifiers, passport numbers, social security numbers, driver's license numbers. Other classes of data that have strict regulatory controls over them. Things like HIPAA, things like PCI. So there's lots and lots of data in breaches that people are saying I'd like to get access to that creates enormous risk for both the individuals and me running the service that's just not going to go in there regardless of all of the other overheads involved in doing that. And you can probably get a sense if you read through the comments, I am starting to lose my patience just with repeating the same thing over and over again. And I understand the frustration of people going, I really want to be able to see my data. I understand the curiosity, but they need to understand the reasons why this is just not feasible and it's not going to happen. And repeating the same thing that others have already said and that I've been responding to for more than 10 years now is not going to make it happen. Now, people then say, well, this is useless. I can't do anything with this. Well, first of all, if it's useless, ignore it. Nothing happens if you ignore it and you just go on. You know what happens if you ignore it? Exactly the same thing as if I hadn't loaded it. That's what happens. On the other hand, if you think it's useful information, then fine. Now you've been notified. What can you do about it? Well, if only I'd written an entire paragraph about specifically that. The questions that are harder to answer, and again, I know these will come up based on prior experience, are what the password is that was exposed, what the website it appeared next to was, and indeed, where were we? Indeed, if it appeared next to a website at all or just alongside an email address. Anyway, so that goes on there. And in fact, the paragraph I was looking for here, it says, so if you're in here, what do you do now? And then it really just comes back to get a password manager, turn on multi-factor authentication, patch your things, run antivirus on your PC. And I've got people in this thread going, I already do all that and I'm angry and I want my stuff. So good on you. You are in that tiny, tiny, tiny minority that already do all of that. The 90% plus of people don't. And when they see that their data has been passed around somewhere else and their password has been exposed and they're in something else, and they're like, oh yeah, shit, I really should get around to getting that password manager. That's who this is for. That's the trigger. If you're the person that already is doing all that stuff, this is not of value to you. And jumping into the comments telling me it's not of value to you is going to get you a link to my guitar lessons blog post, right? That's all you're going to get. Oh, I feel a bit better now. Let's look at the comments. I'll just keep it on topic here. Kevin saying which breaches this is the Telegram scrape data, which I think you've then worked out. Dave, did the Telegram breach show telephone numbers? And just to be clear, and I think you understand this already, but a few people responded. And again, I got a lot of personal emails. So I do make my email address discoverable because I want people to be able to email me about relevant stuff, like discovering new data breaches. But then I must have filed, it must be at least 100 emails from people saying, can you please send me the data? So file. One of the questions that came up, both in the emails and the comments, is, I've never used Telegram before. How am I on there? So, oh man, I literally explained this at the start of the blog post. And I appreciate I do write long blog posts to make sure that all of the questions are answered. But it is in there. Telegram was not breached. The data is not due to a vulnerability at Telegram. Telegram is merely the channel by which people are redistributing data. It'd be a little bit like if you go and paste random shit on Facebook. Does it mean that Facebook had a data breach? No, it means that you post random shit on Facebook. All right, so you might have understood all that already, Dave, so it's not necessarily to pick you up on that. You probably need an AI bot to respond to these comments, but then it would just keep going. Like, I don't think that actually solves the problem. Maybe an AI bot that could give a generic response. What I did with the Ashley Madison breach, almost 9 years ago now for Ashley Madison, how about that? What I did there is I wrote an FAQ. I wrote a blog post that was an FAQ, and every time I got a response from someone, I just had a generic response. Sorry, I can't reply to you personally. There's an FAQ that answers your question. And if I got a question that hadn't been answered before, I added it to the FAQ. And that managed to absolve me of beginning dialogue with 361 million people in this case. Purse says, can this be a attack that uses LLM to cross-reference with reference to probability of sites used? If so, make it public data. Have I been pwned? I think we'll only feed the LLM. Yeah, I mean, who knows what LLMs pick up on now? They pick up on a lot of stuff. Incidentally, you remind me of one thing where people are like, can you at least publish the URL that was in the Stealer logs? The problem with that is, let's say it's Pornhub, hypothetically. If you don't know what that is, Google it after this. And I publish that, and then you look up the account, and then you see it's Pornhub. You know, someone public looks up the account, and they see that in the display. That is a class of data where if they were to ever be breached, that would be flagged as sensitive, just like Ashley Madison, just like all the other weird sites. When I say there are some weird ones on there, trust me. This is not a kink shaming thing, but there are some weird ones. And there's a lot of mainstream adult website stuff too. They're flagged as sensitive to make sure that Have I Been Pwned doesn't become the vector by which one person learns of the affiliation of another person to a site which is more likely to cause them harm, discomfort, trouble in their life. And there's been lots of times where I have learned things I didn't know. Furry websites, for example. I honestly did not know what a furry was the first time I loaded a furry website. I think it was Fur Affinity was the website. And then someone was like, you know, this is it's kind of personal and there's a stigma, you know. Okay, fine. It's sensitive, not publicly searchable. So if I return, first of all, let's imagine we overcome all of the earlier problems and we manage to actually parse the data out. We find a mechanism with Have I Been Pwned to start storing additional data attributes beyond the email address. If I return that publicly, that's a problem. I can't do that, which means that then we have to only return it to people who go through and verify control of their email address. 361 million people, a bunch of them then have emails sent to them. Sending emails at large volumes is extraordinarily problematic for all sorts of reasons. Cost is one of the reasons. Spam is one of the reasons. I was really worried when I loaded this. In fact, I deliberately made attempts to stagger out the rate of notifications. One of the recent breaches, I can't remember which one it was one that was much smaller than this. We ended up on one of the naughty lists, one of the spam naughty lists, and a whole bunch of people couldn't get emails. And emails are the way that you access your domain search dashboard or your API key dashboard. So it killed it for a lot of people. So we also can't create an environment where we suddenly have to send very large numbers of emails to do verification of control of the address, simply to show a piece of data that's really hard to get out anyway. And then we still have no complete confidence that the person accessing the email account is the owner because they've been in a data breach where the password they use everywhere has been spread. Well, it's been a long week. I've been up at 3-something every morning except yesterday doing this. So if my patience appears stretched in some of the responses, I actually closed off comments the night I loaded. When did I load this? I think I loaded it Wednesday. Wednesday night, I was getting so many comments. I ended up just going, I have to close off comments because I'm going to bed and I don't want to wake up and have 500 comments that I then feel I need to respond to. On to something else. Kevin says, did you speak about MediSecure attack? No, I haven't. So for folks interested, MediSecure is an Aussie company that does cybersecurity coordinator. A government cybersecurity coordinator has been tweeting about this, that they have had a data breach. I don't know anything more. I know that they apparently applied to the government for a bailout, which was rejected. It's apparently the first time I think a private company has done that after a data breach. There was a comment earlier up about Coinhive as well. Sam, how's Coinhive progressing? What's the future plan for it? I'd really like to have time to look into that more because I am really curious. I'll tell you what, I'll give you some stats. Let's see if I have the latest figures here for folks just catching up. Coinhive was a crypto miner that was JavaScript based that could be embedded in a website so that you could monetize your traffic. Every hacker and their dog who could get script to run on someone else's website would start embedding Coinhive and then having the Monero coin that it mined sent to their own wallet. So fortunately, that died a death. And then someone, for reasons I still don't understand, decided to give me the domain, which is cool. So I have for many years now embedded my own JavaScript on the Coinhive domain because it's still embedded in all these crazy websites. And what happens then is when someone goes to a website with Coinhive embedded, they get a modal pop up on the screen, then they get redirected to my blog post about owning Coinhive with the hope that they will then go to the website operator and go, hey, your website doesn't work. And then they go, oh yeah, I've got Coinhive on it. Anyway, in the last 30 days, I've had 2.24 million requests. It's just, why is it still in so many places? And this is just on the free plan of Cloudflare, so I'm not seeing referrers. It's 250,000 unique visitors in the last 30 days. It's really, really constant traffic too. That's fascinating. I wonder if I can, oh no, I can't turn that on. I could turn on the Cloudflare analytics, but that needs to be embedded in a web page. And all I'm serving is I'm serving a piece of JavaScript. But mind you, I'm serving the JavaScript. I could capture the referrer in the JavaScript and log that somewhere. So I'd actually like to see the referrers because then I can see which websites are the ones that are serving that up. So yeah, Sam, I want to do that, mate. I want to look more into it just because I'm curious, probably just like you. Rob says, crap, I can't search my domain because I have 14 addresses and have I been pwned. That would put you into the 40% of the world's largest domains, which we put a subscription on in August last year. If it is a personal domain, send us a ticket. Go to support.haveibeenpwned.com, send us a ticket. We'll look after you. We will fix that up. John, before you dash, how are things with your home key integration? Did you ever get things working in the end? Still searching for a suitable lock in the UK. All right, good question. So we have been running the Yale Assure locks. I ended up buying them from the US because I couldn't get, I forget what the reason was, but I couldn't get the model in Australia. Now, this must have been about a year ago. I bought the Australian Zigbee modules, which didn't fit into those ones. So they're the Wi-Fi ones. They do integrate into a Home Assistant via the August integration, but they're all cloud-based for things like unlocking your door, getting your notifications, etc. The locks themselves, very nicely made. They look good. They look really, really good on our door, actually. Nice to interact with. My main complaints are the batteries last for probably about 6 weeks, but you get a warning so you can change them. I've only been locked out once, so now I have a spare 9-volt battery outside in the shed because you can put the 9-volt battery in the bottom and almost like jumpstart your door lock. Other complaint is being Wi-Fi based and being cloud dependent, there is a lag between sending an unlock command and it unlocking, which is okay if you do it as you walk up to your house, but if you're standing in front of the door, it's annoying. There's also a lag where I unlock the door and I walk out and about 5 seconds later, the HomeKit integration sends me an alert that the door's unlocked, but 5 seconds is just long enough that I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. Oh yeah, it's the door. Now, there is now home key integration in the newer ones, which I think launched certainly this year in the US, but we still don't have them in Australia. I don't know where you are, John. I have a feeling you're in the UK. Oh, no, you're in the UK, of course, yep. I'm very tempted to buy the home key ones from the US if they're the same form factor. And the main reason is our kids and my parents, we've given them all unique pins, which are randomly generated because I'm a security guy, and they can't remember the pins. So I put them in their 1Password, but then they have to get the 1Password out and look it up. And even for me, my pin is unique because I'm a security guy, and I have to go and tap. I would love to just be able to walk up and go yoink with the watch on the door and have it open. I think that would be a beautiful value proposition. And if I could order those from the US and also get the Zigbee modules and then resell the other ones, I'd be willing to pay a bit of money to do that upgrade. So long story short, I haven't looked at the other brands because now I'm locked into the form factor of the Yale Assure, but the Yale Assure with HomeKit and a Zigbee module, HomeKit, Home Key, and a Zigbee module seems to be the best option. Per says, new rules for the internet. You need to have a key connected to your SMTP server. With that, use more CPU time, and the cost of that is going to cost someone is going to pay. Is this the old argument about if we put a tiny fraction of a cost on every email, then it gets rid of spam and maybe solves some other problems, such as me being able to send emails cost effectively? That was, I seem to recall, that was proposed like 20 years ago. Make every email cost 1 cent. It'll kill spam. Obviously, that never went anywhere for all sorts of reasons. John says, sounds like halfway there, but the new Assure 2 Plus models look neater. Hang on, is there a new thing I don't know about? Yale Assure 2 Plus. I think that's the one that the same form factor I already have. So that's the one that looks all matte black. Yeah, so that's the same as what we already have. And they are neat. They're lovely. But that's the model that you can, I believe, now get with. In fact, I just found an article on The Verge here. Let me see if this covers it, and then I'll drop it into the chat. The Assure Lock 2 Touch as a fingerprint reader, and the Assure 2 Lock. Oh, no, that was September. Oh, that was from September. That's pretty new. Works with Home Key. Oh, it's got fingerprint on it too. Oh, that's nice. All right, I'll drop this into the chat. And then I think I have to go away and look at it, and I have to figure out if it's actually going to fit my door, because that would actually be kind of nice. That'd be really nice. Okay, folks, I've been going an hour. I'm going to wrap it up there. I do have to finish. It's just got this last little bit of the keynote that just to make it perfect, I have to finish today. And then we will be off to Norway later today. So I'm going to come to you from Norway in a week from now, having done the keynote, having done the 3D printing talk, and probably at a different time of day as well. So cheers, folks. Have a good one. I'll see you from the other side.